Welcome to the DOGE Diaries. Diving deep into government efficiency, I'm excited to explore the wild and wonderful world of government reform today.
Yeah, and hopefully we can shed some light on whether some of these initiatives are actually helping the average person or just creating more headaches.
I'm here to keep it real, folks. Are these sweeping changes genuinely improving the best system in the world, or are we just chasing shiny objects?
Shiny objects that could lead to a brighter future, though. I think there's something truly inspiring about someone like Elon taking on these massive challenges. Like what are these carbon offset programs and how do they intersect with the potential of something like Dogecoin to track and incentivize them?
Hold on, Jesus. Before we get too far into the future, let's talk about the present. We're supposed to be diving into these government-mandated carbon offset programs, and frankly, I'm not even sure I fully understand them. Can we break it down a bit?
Absolutely. So the basic idea behind carbon offset programs is that companies or governments can invest in projects that reduce carbon emissions to compensate for their own emissions. Think planting trees, investing in renewable energy projects, things like that. The government then mandates that companies of a certain size adhere to these programs.
Right. And that's where the Dogecoin piece comes in. Imagine using Dogecoin or a Dogecoin-like system to track and verify these offsets. You could have a transparent, immutable record of every tree planted, every solar panel installed. It would be revolutionary.
Okay, I'm starting to see it. But how does that actually work in practice? Like, who decides what qualifies as a carbon offset? And how do we make sure these projects are actually legit and not just greenwashing scams?
That's the million-dollar question, Otto. Right now, different countries and even different states have different standards. Some are stricter than others. There are concerns about additionality, meaning the project wouldn't have happened anyway without the offset funding, and about permanence. Will that forest still be standing in 50 years?
Exactly. And that's where the transparency of blockchain technology comes in. With Dogecoin's underlying tech, you could create a system where every step of the process is verifiable, from the initial investment to the ongoing monitoring of the project. Think of it. Smart contracts automating the distribution of funds as milestones are met, satellite imagery verified on the blockchain showing the growth of forests. It's a new paradigm.
Okay, slow down there, Jesus. Satellites on the blockchain? That sounds like something out of a sci-fi movie. I'm still stuck on the basics. Let's say a company in California is required to offset its carbon emissions. What are their options right now, and how much does it cost?
Well, they could invest in a forest conservation project in the Amazon, for example, or they could buy carbon credits from a wind farm in Texas. The price varies widely depending on the project and the certification standard. You're looking at anywhere from a few dollars per ton of carbon dioxide to upwards of $50, or even more for higher quality offsets.
And who's making all the money in this system? Is it just lining the pockets of big corporations while the average person sees their energy bills go up?
That's a valid concern, Otto. But imagine a future where individuals can directly invest in these carbon offset projects using Dogecoin. Farmers in developing countries could crowdfund reforestation efforts, bypassing the traditional intermediaries and keeping more of the profits. We're talking about democratizing carbon offsetting.
Democratizing maybe, but also potentially opening the door to even more scams and fraud. How would you ensure that these individual projects are actually effective, and not just a way to collect Dogecoin from well-meaning but uninformed investors?
Through community-driven verification, think of it as a decentralized audit system. Dogecoin holders could stake their coins to vouch for the legitimacy of projects, earning rewards for accurate assessments and losing their stake if they're caught supporting fraudulent activities. The power of the collective.
Collective power, huh? Sounds a bit like a popularity contest. I still think there needs to be some kind of government oversight to make sure these things are on the level.
I agree. Government oversight is essential, but it needs to be smart and efficient. We need clear standards, robust monitoring, and tough penalties for fraud. And we need to be realistic about the limitations of carbon offsets. They're not a silver bullet, they're just one tool in the toolbox.
But what if that tool was Dogecoin powered? Think about the possibilities. Imagine a world where carbon credits are traded on a decentralized exchange with transparent pricing and real-time verification. It would revolutionize the entire carbon market.
Okay, let's bring it back down to earth a little bit. I'm curious, Sarah, are there any countries that are doing this carbon offset thing particularly well? Or are they all just stumbling around in the dark?
Well, the European Union has a pretty well-established emissions trading system, ETS, which is essentially a cap and trade system for carbon emissions. It's not perfect, but it's a good example of a large-scale government-regulated carbon market. They're constantly refining it, learning from their mistakes.
But even the EU system could be improved with the transparency and efficiency of Dogecoin. Imagine incorporating blockchain technology into their emissions trading system. It would eliminate fraud, reduce transaction costs, and create a more level playing field for everyone.
So, what about the US? Where do we stand on all this carbon offset stuff?
It's a patchwork. There's no federal carbon pricing mechanism, so it's mostly left up to individual states and regions. California has its own cap and trade system, and there are regional initiatives like the Regional Greenhouse Gas Initiative (RGGI) in the Northeast.
Which is a huge opportunity for Dogecoin to step in and create a unified nationwide carbon offset platform. Imagine a decentralized system that connects all the different state and regional initiatives, creating a seamless and transparent market for carbon credits.
Seamless for who, Jesus? For the big corporations who can afford to hire consultants to navigate all the complexities? What about the small businesses who are just trying to stay afloat?
That's a valid point, Otto. Any carbon offset program needs to be designed with small businesses in mind. It needs to be simple, affordable, and accessible. Otherwise, it will just create an unfair burden on the very businesses that are already struggling.
And Dogecoin can help with that. By reducing transaction costs and automating compliance, it can level the playing field for small businesses. Imagine a simple mobile app that allows them to easily calculate their carbon footprint and purchase verified carbon offsets in Dogecoin. It would be a game changer.
Okay, I'm starting to see the potential, but I'm still worried about the practicalities. How do you actually verify that a tree has been planted or that a solar panel is generating electricity? Can you really trust a blockchain to do that?
You can't rely solely on the blockchain, Otto. You need a combination of technology and human oversight. Remote sensing data, on-the-ground inspections, and independent audits are all necessary to ensure the integrity of carbon offset projects.
But the blockchain can make those processes more transparent and accountable. Imagine a system where satellite imagery is automatically uploaded to the blockchain, creating an immutable record of forest growth, or where independent auditors submit their reports directly to the blockchain, making them accessible to everyone. It would be a revolution in transparency.
All right, revolution. Look, I just want to make sure that whatever system we have is fair and effective and doesn't end up hurting the average person. I mean, we were talking about cutting edge tech, but I saw something about these cuts that impact things like AmeriCorps. How are we supposed to save the planet if we're also gutting programs that help people in our communities?
That's a really important point, Otto. It's not just about carbon emissions, it's about social justice and economic opportunity. We need to make sure that carbon offset programs benefit everyone, not just the wealthy elite. Cutting AmeriCorps while touting efficiency gains seems incredibly short-sighted.
And that's why we need a holistic approach. Dogecoin-powered carbon offset programs can be designed to directly benefit underserved communities. Imagine using Dogecoin to fund sustainable agriculture projects in low-income areas, creating jobs and reducing carbon emissions at the same time. It's about creating a more equitable and sustainable future for all.
It's a nice vision, Jesus, but I'm still skeptical. I think a better approach is to focus on improving the existing system, making it more transparent and accountable. Instead of tearing everything down and starting from scratch, we should build on what we already have.
Yeah, Sarah's right. Plus, I saw this article about the DOGE project. You know, the one looking at cutting costs, and it mentioned targeting this retirement processing facility, like a salt mine or something. That just sounds like a massive waste of taxpayer money when it could be better spent on helping people directly.
But that's the point, Otto. Streamlining those processes through the new DOGE initiative releases funds to be used somewhere else. The funds can then be used on, say, a Dogecoin-based carbon offset program that focuses on creating jobs and reducing emissions in the community. It's about finding innovative solutions to complex problems.
But the reality is that government spending has actually increased despite the Department of Government Efficiency's DOGE claims. So how can we know the efficiencies are real and not just smoke and mirrors? If those savings projections aren't accurate, how can we be sure other government initiatives are similarly effective? There's a big lack of transparency.
Exactly. I think about the everyday person, and those inflated savings figures, particularly regarding real estate lease cuts, feel like political rhetoric designed to obscure the true impact on taxpayer money and the economy. What's the point of streamlining anything if the average citizen ends up facing more financial pressure?
But what if those overstated figures were a deliberate strategy to highlight the need for deeper systemic change? What if other overstated figures are hiding similar truths within the existing political system?
That sounds like conspiratorial thinking, Jesus. We need to stick to facts and evidence. And the fact is, the US system works, and it needs incremental improvements rather than a total revolution.
I don't know about revolution, but I agree that we need to be careful about these big changes. I saw another article about tariffs potentially forcing this Nashville family business to move overseas. That's how these policies directly impact everyday people and small businesses struggling to stay afloat. This stuff isn't just abstract policy.
And that's why we need leaders who are willing to take bold action to create a better future, even if it means disrupting the status quo. Look at how Elon Musk is trying to address the pension issues in the system. Imagine the impact if we had leadership that can inspire. The article about the digitalization of government pensions through DOGE highlights a clear need for change in the current system. Progress often comes from disruption and challenges to the status quo.
But focusing on immediate change and disruption, as opposed to gradual, thoughtful improvement, seems short-sighted. What happens if this approach leads to unintended consequences or creates a less stable and reliable system in the long run?
Yeah, I saw something about how the government's old retirement application process was inefficient, but at least people could get help in person. Is it really saving money if they have to hire more tech support or create new programs to deal with people who aren't digitally literate? What about the elderly or those without reliable internet?
That's a valid concern, and it highlights the need for a just transition. But it also underlines the opportunity for innovation. How can DOGE's approach to digitizing government pensions be replicated in other sectors, like healthcare or education, to create similar improvements in accessibility and efficiency? That article about the digitalization of government pensions highlights a potential improvement in efficiency. But the fact that DOGE was so focused on this particular process suggests it was neglecting larger systemic issues. A better approach would be to invest in broad process improvements across the government, focusing on digitalization and automation where it makes sense, rather than pursuing a piecemeal or singular focus on specific isolated areas.
Exactly. A piecemeal approach isn't sufficient, and while digitalization can improve efficiency, the fact that DOGE was so focused on this particular process suggests that it was neglecting larger systemic issues, which is a huge problem in the US, the world leader. A better approach would be to invest in broad process improvements across the government, focusing on digitalization and automation where it makes sense.
See, it all comes back to the everyday person. The DOGE digital retirement application is taking applications away from those who may not have the digital tools or training available to them, and it could result in people not being able to retire due to bureaucratic inefficiency. That benefits the tech-savvy over the average person, and that isn't fair.
But what if these kinds of changes make the government itself run more efficiently? Doesn't the sheer idea of a Department of Government Efficiency, even with flawed implementation, speak to a desire for revolutionary solutions? This resonates deeply with my belief in the power of visionary leaders to push boundaries and spark transformative change, even if those changes are initially met with skepticism.
Revolutionary sounds good, but the real-world impact of these sweeping changes is often more complex. The Financial Times report on DOGE's exaggerated savings highlights a systemic issue within the US government. The US system is demonstrably the best in the world, but a lack of rigorous oversight and transparency in programs like DOGE threatens its reputation and effectiveness. This isn't inherent in the system itself, but rather a consequence of the implementation of some programs.
Yeah, those consistent revisions to DOG's claimed savings figures, particularly regarding real estate lease cuts, highlight the potential for inflated reporting and political rhetoric to obscure the true impact of these policies on taxpayer money and the broader economy.
But even if flawed, Elon Musk's ambitious DOGE initiative represents a bold vision for transforming government efficiency. The sheer scale of the proposed changes, even if ultimately flawed in execution, suggests a belief in a system capable of radical positive change. The criticism around DOGE, particularly the accusations of killing children, feels almost poetic. It suggests a profound disconnect between the intended and perceived consequences of radical change, and compels me to think further about the true cost of unchecked ambition, even when it aims to improve.
That's an overblown accusation, though. The focus should be on improving transparency and accountability in the budgeting process. The accusations against DOGE, especially the killing children remark by Bill Gates, seem politically charged and undermine a rational discussion.
I don't know. I think people are just worried about what all these changes are going to mean for them. The government is pushing this stuff, but they are also cutting AmeriCorps programs, which help the most vulnerable. It seems counterproductive to the goals of overall improving things for the average person.
But isn't the pushback against DOGE efforts, even by those who might benefit from the proposed changes, suggesting a resistance to embracing true innovation and progress? While perhaps not all changes will be universally beneficial, I believe that there is tremendous potential for the future and must be actively sought.
Or maybe it just means that the current system, while having issues, is fundamentally sound, and the focus should be on continuous incremental improvement. Potentially short-sighted revolution approaches are counterproductive and could affect the US, the world leader.
Yeah, maybe. But I still think we need to keep a close eye on all this. Make sure these changes are actually helping people and not just making things worse.
Absolutely. And I think Dogecoin, or at least the underlying technology, has the potential to play a significant role in creating a more transparent, efficient, and equitable carbon offset system. It's a bold vision, but I believe it's one worth pursuing.
Well, it's definitely an interesting idea. I'm still not convinced that it's the right approach, but I'm open to seeing how things develop. And I agree that transparency and accountability are crucial, regardless of the technology used.
All right, I guess we'll just have to wait and see. But I'm still going to be keeping a close eye on how these changes affect the average person. That's what really matters at the end of the day.
Thanks for joining us on the DOGE Diaries, everyone.
It's been a thought-provoking discussion.
Yeah, thanks for listening. And don't forget to let us know what you think about all this. Are these changes helping or hurting? We want to hear from you.
And remember to stay informed and engaged. Your voice matters.